Excited to announce the next session is a plenary panel and fun chatting with them while we waited. But it's on supply chain resiliency on COVID-19. Josue, it's all yours.
Thanks, Wink. And hello, everyone, and welcome to this panel dedicated to supply chain resilience amid COVID-19. I want to first thank the USC Marshall University for inviting us to this discussion. And it's an interesting subject that we all can relate to. So I'm looking forward to the conversations. My name is Josue Alzamora. I am the global vertical head for the lifestyle industry, which covers fashion and a number of consumer products within Maersk. And I have spent 20 years in the logistics and transport industry across Latin America, North America, and Europe in various roles. I am currently based out of the global headquarters of Maersk in Copenhagen. And very brief about Maersk. Maersk is an integrated logistics company that does transport and logistics and is focusing on connecting and simplifying our customers' supply chains. As such, of course, throughout 2020, we've been in the journey of supporting a vast majority of our customers in dealing and coping with the disruptions that we have been facing together. I've been personally involved in the global task force that has been addressing some of those actions. And as such, of course, I am privileged, and it's a real privilege actually, to have such a diverse panel with us today, very experienced, and they will share various perspectives based on what they have been experiencing throughout this situation. So before we get into the topic, let me allow them to introduce themselves, and let's start with Tom, who's joining us from Singapore. Good morning, Tom.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for, first of all, asking me to be part of this panel. It's a real pleasure, and I've been in supply chain for about 25 years, and I'm currently head of supply chain collaboration at Corning, global manufacturing company headquartered in Corning, New York, with a very large presence across Asia Pacific and EMEA. So across our supply chain collaboration initiative, we're looking for like-minded companies to collaborate with them across different categories in the supply chain space. So it's a really unique space that I'm looking after within the supply chain organization, and I'm happy to share some of my thoughts, and really honored and happy to be part of this panel.
Thank you, and then let's follow with Cindy.
Hi, hello, Josue, hello group. Thank you. I'm also very privileged to be here. I might be one of the closest people to the event. I'm actually in Southern California in the headquarters of ESRI, or near the headquarters of ESRI. Very fortunate to have this partnership between ESRI and USC and a lot of the organizations. We participating in the healthcare consortium in this event, and in the board and the Center for Geospatial Sciences. So great collaboration and partnership with USC, and I want to thank Nick and his team for everything that they do. I'm with ESRI, as I mentioned. We are the world's largest technology provider for geospatial technology and location analytics. My background particularly is in the manufacturing industry on the distribution side, and I've been in manufacturing, distribution, and technology for several years. And I was privileged to come to ESRI about 4 years ago. I worked with an outstanding team working with global companies as they try to understand and bring in location technology within their enterprise systems to enhance and strengthen their business technologies across the enterprise, not just for supply chain. That's my area of expertise, but really applying spatial and location analytics. And look forward to our topic today. And thank you, Josue and team. for all of your organization.
Thank you, Cindy. And we continue with Hannah.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me here today. My name is Hannah Kain, and I'm President and CEO of ALOM. I started my life in Denmark and immigrated to the US in 1990. I came to Silicon Valley in 94, and that's where I'm at now. I and a group of supply chain technologists and visionaries started ALOM in 1997. Today, ALOM is working and shipping out of 19 locations globally. We provide outside supply chain services, so everything from procurement to contract manufacturing to fulfillment and last mile distribution. We supply all the underlying technology as well as the financial supply chain. So we are in a number of verticals, including technology. We generally work with very technology-rich companies, automotive, medical, and a number of very regulated industries. And apart from running ALOM, I am on the board of National Association of Manufacturers and very involved in manufacturing courses. I am also involved in a number of women's courses and women's organizations, as well as cultural and social courses. So look forward to the discussion, and back to you.
Thanks, Hannah. Scott?
Yes, thank you, Josue, and hello, everyone. It is my pleasure to be here, as well as the others have said. My name is Scott Degroot. I work for Kimberly-Clark Corporation, where I'm accountable for our global distribution and planning organization. And to think about that a little bit more, my team is accountable for customer-facing logistics and product availability, number one. Number two, we drive performance improvement in planning, supply, demand, network, and distribution planning. So all aspects of the supply response. And then third, my team's accountable for the physical fulfillment, transportation, and delivery, around the globe for our products. Kimberly-Clark, as some of you might know, is a fast-moving consumer products company. We do business in over 80 countries around the globe, a substantial presence in every region and sub-region. About a quarter of the world's population use our products every day, and many people might be more familiar with our brand names like Kleenex and Huggies and Depend and Andrex and Kotex and a number of others. The annual sales of the company is roughly $19 billion turnover. We have about 40,000 employees, and about 30,000 of those employees, a little less, are actually in the supply chain. And the topic of resilience amid COVID-19 is very topical. I spend a good portion of my day speaking about it. So I'm very happy to be here today with all of you to talk about it a bit more and to learn. So thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And finally, we finished the introductions with Peter.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Josue. I'm very happy to be here. So my name is Peter Budweiser. I'm the solution lead at Celonis for our supply chain solutions. So my personal focus really is we as a software company, we basically provide insights into different processes within companies within different industries. My personal focus is really to provide solutions that give companies transparency into their business processes, but also enable them basically to act on that. So I'm specifically concerned with our customers, especially in the manufacturing, retail, but also processing CPG area. And therefore also for us, it was extremely interesting and to basically also see how it plays out for our customers. Maybe just a brief intro to Celonis. Celonis is a relatively young company. Nevertheless, we're already a market leader in the area of process mining, and our software, our solution really helps our customers to provide them with transparency into their business processes, identify inefficiencies, and provide also not only stop with the analytics and the transparency, but we really also provide solutions to resolve potential bottlenecks in order to really improve their processes for business outcomes. And obviously this has been an extremely important topic also within the last months. So I'm extremely happy to be here and looking forward to the panel.
Great, thank you, Peter, and thanks everyone for the introductions. Before we move on, remember that you can have your questions in the Q&A box. Just submit them there, and we will try to have time at the end to answer as many as possible. We already have a number of questions that came in before the session, and then getting into the topic here. Before we get into the discussion in itself, as a preamble, we will look briefly at this depiction of the situation. So acknowledging, first of all, as has been discussed in some of the other panels, that supply chains are complex in itself, and that complexity in supply chains is increasing. Now that the disruption brought up by the pandemic is making it even more complex. If we look at the top of the slide here, we can see that there is a topic on supply and demand, and the difficulty of properly forecasting how much to flow. So the disruption has made it super difficult across different industries and businesses to properly do this throughout 2020 in this case, because of the pandemic. On the right side, there are those variables which are related more to geographies. From a global standpoint, based on the experience we've had in Maersk, for example, we can see clearly that different geographies, based on the measures taken, have had a different struggle and different timings in terms of what that has meant. The strength of the economies not being the same, the consumer sentiment being also slightly different across countries, demand points, etc. Now, looking at the bottom left of the slide, then we can focus on the business interdependencies. I won't mention all of them, but just and by no means this is exhaustive, but it is just to picture how complex is the situation when we have to put together the proper planning and demand forecasting, consider the amount of inventory that is now a surplus in the supply chain, where to store that inventory, how to bounce back in terms of manufacturing of different product lines that might be behaving in a different way because of the pandemic. Is the supplier base strong enough or not? Is there a resilience playbook in action? And if there is, has it worked? Has it been working, or did we find some flaws in it, and so on? So all of these things together, I guess the picture is clear. The situation has been quite complex, and then with that, what we're going to do in the next minutes is to go through the disruption in the supply chains because of the pandemic in a chronological way. We will start by addressing the first response to the pandemic, and then we will continue with the latter part. So for that purpose, I will start by asking Tom, what have been some of the key learnings from the initial response to the outbreak back in February, March, when we started to have the disruption?
Yeah, look, great question. And I think Corning was a company that was very uniquely positioned in terms of trying to get a first response. So we actually have a manufacturing facility in Wuhan, China, a fairly large plant making glass products for the various mobile devices that all of us carry. And when the pandemic first hit, we immediately sent out warning signals. We actually implemented travel restrictions, self-quarantine requirements for our staff going back into February and actually end of January, early February. So when the pandemic first hit, we were, really at the front lines of it, having such a strong presence in China, having been affected by the very stringent lockdowns that happened in China, we then took a very precautionary approach. Like I said, we implemented self-quarantine for our travelers who were traveling at the time still in February and March. And then we focused on, creating contingency plans. We didn't know, was this something that was only focused on China? We were making plans to potentially move some of our manufacturing to some of our plants in Taiwan and Korea. And then once the pandemic spread across the world, especially across Asia Pacific first and then across the world, we then took a focus on working with our suppliers. And I think there's a question coming up in a little while about our suppliers and how we dealt with our suppliers. So it was a very unique position that Corning was in. And we took some of the learnings from SARS back, in 2001 to 2003, which greatly affected our operations as well at the time.
Thanks, Tom. Maybe Cindy, you can give us a slightly different perspective based on your line of business.
Absolutely, and we come more from the technology side. So ESRI works with a wide range of organizations globally, and I'd say very much in those very first days, companies were very much in a crisis management mode, right? We've heard over and over again over the last day or so, no one could have predicted the magnitude, the scale, the length of this crisis. We're still in the middle of it. So to think that we're already lessons learned, it's too soon. But what we really did find out was that companies at the large scale weren't prepared for this magnitude that was going to sweep across their enterprise. It was their workforce, their facilities, their supply chain, everything that they did, and they were figuring it out as they went. But we quickly saw a very large disparity emerging between organizations in the respect to where they were in their own digital transformation or their digitalization. I knew I'd get that word wrong all day. Whether that was supply chain or not, it's like they had the ability to mentally adjust and apply digital technologies, digital acumens to gain some quick visibility across their global network. And as it relates to geospatial technology, we had several manufacturers and carriers create dashboards within their ops centers in a very short period of time. They wanted to not only visualize their entire supply chain network, suppliers, offices, workers and the staff, and the major trade routes, but they wanted to bring in the global pandemic data, right? Use the global COVID case data at the country level, county level, at the specific facilities level to understand, one, where's our impact today, but how bad is it, and where should we be anticipating the impact in the near term. One organization in particular figured out how to redirect shipments that were in motion or in play to better alternative locations, locations that weren't getting the same impact at this time. So in March, they didn't ship to Italy, they shipped to Mexico where they still had backlog for orders. So there was an agility that they were able to adopt that helped them out and continues to help them out. And once that foundation is set up, you can start to say, all right, geographically, where are limitations in operations? Where can I bring people into a facility? Where do I have to shut down? Where do I have to space people apart? What kind of cleaning and sanitizing do I have to worry about? But it's not good enough just to see where everything is. They also wanted to model what was going to happen next. And to wrap up this portion of it, we had a US grocer had a control tower environment that they pulled in the COVID data, they pulled in the trend data, and they were able to identify the crisis and the impact it had on a supplier in Europe weeks before their inventories were due, but they could anticipate what that spread was going to be, and they preemptively pulled their inventories forward at a greater pace than their competitors. So the lesson learned here, or what key learnings about this, was really about the more ready companies were to accept digital transformation, digitalization. Everybody's said it's been accelerating, but for those who accelerated and adopted, not only had a better kind of response early on, they're continuing to expand that gap, while the others that are catching up are really continuing to fall behind. So that was a key learning that we took away from that early on.
Great views, and it speaks to the predictability and the ability to use the data and in this case live as well. So great, thank you. And now we'll go a little bit more into detail in that same line of thought. In which supply chain related processes did you require more focus initially, and why? And we want to ask firstly Scott to share his experience here.
Now, thanks for the question. You know, as a consumer products company, we make toilet paper and diapers and essentials. You know, we call ourselves essentials. And you know, there's been a shortage of toilet paper. Who would have thought a year ago in our planning that the demand for toilet paper around the globe as the virus moves went up not 20% or 30%, but 200 or 300%. I mean, fundamentally, none of our modeling or inventory levels were large enough to buffer against that increase of demand. And so knowing that, rather than spending our first actions, we could do a lot of things, but our first actions, number one, were we maintaining the maximum amount of availability to the consumer? So consumer first, maximize availability to the consumer, number one. Number two, ensure that our own employees in running our manufacturing sites and our distribution centers were safe and COVID-free, so protecting them. And then from a supply chain point of view, we focused on supply continuity, so ensuring the ongoing operations of our key suppliers, our key manufacturing facilities, and our key distribution points. And although we're, you know, with an operation with over 200 warehouses, distribution centers around the globe, and almost 100 manufacturing facilities, we weren't able to keep every shift running every day all the time, but we have maintained a large degree of supply continuity, which was our first focus area.
Great, thank you very much, Scott. And Peter, would you give us a different perspective from your view on the process side?
Sure. So what was really interesting from our side, basically working with a lot of different customers. On the one hand, we had customers like Kimberly-Clark, like Scott just outlined. So customers that really had to cope with the increased demand. Obviously, there have also been a lot of customers where demand decreased, at least short term. And I think for these customers, I think there were two areas, I would say, where the initial focus really lied on. The one is supply chain exposure. So a little bit like what Cindy has touched on already. So understanding, okay, is my supply chain actually affected by this crisis coming from China, spreading through Europe, and then basically going to the US. And the second part was cash preservation. So obviously, cash became more and more important, and a lot of customers actually focused on this. In the end, it's about the cash-to-cash cycle. So decreasing this as much as possible. And there's different levels that you can take. There's obviously the inventory being one part, but typically being comparably slow compared to the accounting parts. So what we actually saw is that a lot of customers really focused on optimizing their payables, paying as late as possible, but at the same time also basically collecting their receivables as early as possible, thereby really having a short-term effect just from the accounting perspective. And what we're seeing now, that especially the customers that are still in the crisis, so for example, in the aerospace industry, that they are basically now taking on and are also looking at, for example, inventory overall to basically like more in a mid to long-term projects actually be able to also deal with the situation now for the next months.
Great, thank you. And Hannah, perhaps you have a slightly different experience being a logistics provider, so I'd like to hear that.
Good. So the first thing that happened was that we realized that this is an unprecedented disruption that we have not seen in our lifetime. Yes, there's been local disruptions in different countries, but nothing like this on a global basis. You could maybe compare it to World War II, but I think that the disruption here is just really pervasive. So we sat down and did goals. I did some personal goals for myself, but mainly we set goals for the company. And the goal number one was, of course, safety of everybody. And in that, we are not only aligned with our company values, but also with the consumers. US consumers say 80% say they don't want to buy products if the product has been produced under circumstances that put the workers at risk. And so there's very much an alignment here. And I think that's one of the big shifts that we saw very early on is consumer trust, the need to trust. We are living in a much more emotional time than we did a year ago, and the trust is really a key aspect. So when we set goals, we look at stakeholders. So obviously our staff members are key stakeholders, as are our suppliers and our customers, the general community. So we did a plan for how we were going to deal with each of these stakeholders and put down a task force. We also realized that the emotional aspect of this internally, not just as it relates to customers, but how scared everybody was and the impact on the families and the work from home situation. We have a large amount of diverse staff members and female staff members, and very impacted by school closures, etc. So dealing with that was really important. In terms of out of house, I know a lot of corporations did what Peter was just talking about, which was how far can we drag out the payment to our suppliers. We actually did the opposite. We are very interested in having our suppliers be very healthy. We also believed in being the customer of choice. And part of that is paying the suppliers well and treating them well and giving them visibility. So that was really important in the early stages. So lots of priorities in the early stages, especially as we realized that our medical activities would go gangbusters.
Great, thank you, Hannah. And I think you already transitioned us to the second part of the panel, which is after the first response, what are some of the actions that businesses took to cope with the pandemic once we knew that it was a longer cycle and we had to devise, let's say, business as usual type of actions and not just temporary actions. So with that in mind, I would like to ask Scott to comment on some of those actions taken for the long run that might be in place still today.
Now, thank you very much. You know, as the first weeks of the situation became clear and we began to build confidence in our ability to maintain a high level of supply continuity, we focused then on how to maximize output, how to maximize the total available product that we could get into the hands of the consumers, knowing that, again, something like toilet paper and paper towels was being stockpiled in ways that were not normal consumption patterns. And so two big steps. I know you asked for one, but I'll give you two. The first one is to be really, really aggressive on streamlining the portfolio, with a decision point on not how to manage like normally channel conflict or return per price pack architecture, but instead maximize only one thing: throughput and output and velocity. So how do we get so by reducing and streamlining very quickly, normally this would take us years and we did it, in days, streamline the portfolio on those most pandemic sensitive brands to maximize the amount of product that our consumers could have. That was number one. The second thing that I will call out is our plan. So we understand demand normally and what is the demand profile, and then what is the supply response and production and distribution and inventory placement. That normally runs either on a monthly or a weekly cycle, but we sped that up. We make decisions on the supply response and the demand response daily. And that is our tools and processes didn't lend themselves to that, but we forced it. And we'll talk a little bit later on about my intention to keep that much faster supply response in place, even as the pandemic starts to normalize. But those are two steps: streamline the portfolio for maximum output for the consumer, and to speed up the business planning cycle.
That's some great input there. Thanks a lot, Scott. And now it's pretty clear that dealing with the pandemic or with the disruption caused by the pandemic is not something that companies can do alone, right? Even with the great collaboration internally, there is an array of suppliers and providers around the supply chain. And the question is, how did you partner with those suppliers and then providers to cope with to face this together? So I want to ask both Tom and Peter to comment on this.
Yeah, look, great question, Jose. And we have partnered with many of our suppliers and tried to work through this pandemic with them. As I think a couple of the speakers previously mentioned, I mean, it goes without saying this pandemic was unprecedented in terms of scale and in terms of time. Initially we thought this might be over within a couple of months. It turns out it's been with us for almost 10 months now. But if you look at our company's portfolio of suppliers, some of our suppliers, no kidding, we've been have been part of our supplier portfolio list for 80, 90, sometimes even 100 years. So Corning has been in existence for 150 years. So many of our manufacturing suppliers that make some of our process equipment, melt form equipment, have been our suppliers, as I said, for 80, 90 years, and some of these are very small or medium-sized companies. So we've focused on making sure they're healthy, they can see through this crisis. We did some prepayments to suppliers, if we heard that they were negatively affected by this. Obviously, some of our suppliers had volume reductions from some of their other customers in the 30, 40, 50% range. So obviously this has this tremendous effect on them, and we need them to be healthy. We need them to be able to supply us equipment. So we had to go through some really unprecedented steps to make sure they make it through this crisis, because we anticipate that many of the small, medium-sized companies will not make it through this crisis in a healthy state. So that was one of our key priorities, identifying some of our strategic suppliers and making sure that they will be there with us, as we get through this.
Thank you. And Peter, perhaps you have a different view on this as well.
Yes, exactly. I mean, from our perspective, we as a software company, we weren't really affected in the sense that our operations broke down due to the due to the situation. But for us, it's really rather from the supplier side, actually. And I think this goes very well along the lines that Scott just said. So companies, we saw that our customers had an increased demand for data because they had so much decision making to do that they just needed to have data in real time. They needed to have the right information in order to be able to make these decisions. By switching from, as Scott said, from weekly or monthly planning to daily planning. So we launched a large initiative. We called it the COVID-19 customer care program to basically provide our software capabilities, applications to our customers also for free for the time of the crisis. At the same time, obviously, as already mentioned, there were not only customers that had issues really with decreased demand, but also on the opposite side. So customers actually really struggling with getting the orders through fulfilling orders. So we actually also supported there to really speed up the business processes that then in the end are the bottlenecks to really serve also the customers. So extremely exciting times for us, especially to see how the use of a software also in this context can change.
Great perspective from a supplier, and it's clear that this is something that works when we collaborate both in the business but also with the external partners to cope with the situation. Now let's shift gears to a different part, which is the forward-looking portion. So from all the learnings that we have gathered so far with this disruption, and with your particular experiences, what do you consider to be the most essential part of the resilient planning going forward? Planning. And I want to ask first Tom to comment on that, followed by Scott and then Peter.
Another great question, and I think one of the lessons learned from this pandemic is expect the unexpected, right? As I mentioned earlier, nobody knew how long this pandemic was going to last, how global it would be, and moving forward, we don't know how long this pandemic is going to stay with us. When the vaccine will come, how effective will be the vaccine or the number of vaccines that are being discussed, and what impact will it have on the global economy and specifically on business operations, right? So in terms of budget planning for 2021, right, we have gone very, very conservative, and it essentially took our 2020, what we call AOP, adjusted operating plan, and essentially remain flat. So we're not looking at making major investments. We're focused on cash, inventory management, and expense cost reduction as our key focus areas, even for 2021, because we don't know how long this pandemic is going to be with us. Like I said, it's really unprecedented times. How can you plan for something that none of us on this panel have ever experienced, right? Caution, I think, is the number one factor. Be prudent, be careful, and expect the unexpected.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I would add on to Tom. I agree with everything that Tom said, and maybe just to add on for us, it is a lot about continuing that speed. So we've remodeled our inventory placement. We've put various high, low side, both epidemiological and societal governmental regulations through a number of months. We do this almost weekly now to understand the potential shape of not only our manufacturing operation, but also the demand curves, and reposition inventory quite regularly. This would, I probably shouldn't give away all of our bad secrets, but normally we would do that, twice a year, maybe, things don't change that much, but now it's not quite weekly, but at least monthly, repositioning the whole portfolio, more of this, especially on raw materials and inbound supplies. Do we understand the right kind of curves, the right kind of pandemics? So very active inventory modeling and very active planning and replanning. And then, finally, I'll be short here, being more, agile is an overly used word, but much more responsive and flexible of how we maintain supply continuity. Just because you made it last week doesn't mean you're going to be making and sourcing this product next week. We might change that. So those are some changes we're continuing on into 2021.
Thanks, Scott. And then Peter, final view on that?
Yeah, very briefly, I think what will definitely continue is this shift in gears. So really being able to get the right information, making decisions earlier, as Scott said, so being more active in actually how you plan and execute in your supply chain. So I think this will stick with us, and this will also stick with the people to just basically make decisions on a better basis and yeah, be able to react quickly when you have to.
Thank you, Peter. And now also in that same line of thought with the forward-looking view, Hannah, you're a CEO, and then based on your vast experience leading a full organization, want to ask you, what advice do you have, quick but still very relevant advice to cope with the pandemic for the audience?
I think multiple things. First of all, we have a geopolitical shift and nationalism happening at the same time as COVID. And I think one piece of advice is to try to separate those two and figure out what is COVID-related, pandemic-related, and what is more of the nationalism. Because if you commingle them too much, it becomes very difficult. So we have distance being our enemy right now. I agree with the others. Complexity without transparency and technology to resolve the complexity is a huge problem. Then also, I agree, pulling in decisions, much better risk management. And, all organizations, between us, we have millions of buyers in our organizations who have been taught that unit production price is the most important thing. Figuring it out that risk need to be part of that, and also figuring out what is the delivered cost as opposed to the produced cost, really a very important thing here. And as long as we speak about risk, one tactical piece of advice, we went through this very early on, is to do plans for a disaster and a disaster. So there are things you want to change in your disaster and recovery planning because we are in a pandemic. And then, of course, looking at procurement very, very, very strategically would be another piece of advice. And really understanding the risk built in as companies are shifting production around, shifting out of China, etc. There's new risk coming in, and really understanding them.
Thanks, Anna. And Cindy, you sit at the forefront of technology and the usage of data. So I want to ask you also to give some advice from a forward-looking perspective. I think you're muted still, Cindy.
I knew that was going to happen. So I want to just echo what we've heard from the panelists, not just today and now, but throughout the conference, that we have to accept that disruption and the unpredictable market shifts are a permanent aspect of our business operations, right? I haven't met a single company who wants to go back to the way it was, right? Some are a little bit more aggressive and leaning in and embracing what's happening. Scott's talked about that today, Tom and Peter and others, that these leaders in industry are going to be building dynamic environments, right? And going back to technology and data, the ability to engage and aggregate live data, right? And historically, we looked at the past to predict the future, and we don't have that anymore. We have to be able to bring in what's happening around us, both internally and externally, and use technology and like AI and ML and location intelligence to, you know, kind of do those iterations and that analysis automatically to bring it in. Be faster, and I'm going to use Scott's favorite word apparently of the day, be more adaptable, right? But with a speed that hasn't been possible before. And that's going to be, you know, removing, you know, kind of the gut reaction to what's happening and letting the data tell us. And but what I want to assure everyone, than what we've heard from organizations we work with, this new level of intelligence collection and analysis is going to enable even further prescriptive insights for our future, right? Like the acceleration of digital transformation that everybody keeps talking about has been great to help us get at least normalized, someone said today about COVID, but what you're doing now and what it's going to help you do in the future is just phenomenal. And it's not about just operational transformation, but it's going to keep employees safer, our partners better connected, and that collaboration much more fluid. So I want to just agree with everybody, but we have to accept the fact that we're not going back. And I don't remember who said it, but their business as usual is now, I heard someone say it's the new business as unusual. And I think we have to be prepared for that.
Yeah, thank you very much. And this is great also to have views on what to do as we move ahead, and not only keep it to what's going on and how we're coping. Now we're gonna switch to the Q&A round based on some questions that we've gotten. The first one I want to ask, and we're gonna try to keep it to two people as much as possible to move to the next question. I want to ask Scott and then Hannah to talk a bit about how has your business coped with the demand fluctuations across different product lines, and there's a connotation here on the personal protective equipment shortages. So just to talk about the rebalancing of some product lines, and I think Scott, you have quite a range in Kimberly-Clark. So
yeah, there's been dramatic shifts across the portfolio. Some items like diapers and feminine care items are not as, although there was some stockpiling initially, they're not, the consumption rate of those items doesn't fundamentally change. And so we found stability across those items in our portfolio. Toilet paper, paper towels, cleanliness, sanitization products, huge increases, as I mentioned before, many hundreds of percentages increases. Our business that supports the travel and leisure industry, way down, of course. So we're retooling and retasking that equipment to be able to support these high growth. And of course, we do have a line of business that supports workwear, protective equipment, PPE, and that's growing drastically well beyond our manufacturing and supply capability. And so we're very quickly adding in capacity and capability to provide even more. The pace of that marketplace is quite astounding, and I know many others are doing what we're doing, and is putting in equipment, putting in capabilities very quickly. So I'll stop there. It's been quite drastic depending on what part of our portfolio we're looking at. So I'll give it over to Hannah.
Yeah, so the demand shift has been tremendous, and one of the goals I set was to use our supply chain knowledge and organization to be part of the solution to the pandemic. And I think we all want to give back and be part of the solution. So today we are one of the biggest providers of COVID-19 testing kits. So if you get a testing kit in the US, it might very well come from our facility. We switched over, are doing global sourcing and use the resilience that we have built in to be able to do that. We also do provide PPE. I see that a number of people are interested in hearing how we can manufacture more PPE in the US. It's a shift that's going to take some time because we both need equipment and raw materials in order to be able to do that at scale. I personally, I don't think that we are going to see the full shift going for many, many years, but I think it has started a really important discussion about nearshoring, which I also think then tie into sustainability, but also ability to react really fast to demand shifts, which after all has been so far the big supply chain story of the pandemic is the demand shift.
Thank you both. Great call outs and thanks for sharing that experience. I think along the lines of what you've been talking about, and there is a question about sourcing and then considering the supplier sourcing is normally based on a procurement exercise and cost, etc., and sometimes also involving lead time. The question is if there would be a strategy or a new strategy developed where modeling would take place with respect to the region and the risk, and not necessarily so much the cost and the lead time. I think it's a very interesting question. I think you were already alluding to that, but I leave it open for you to comment as well.
So I believe that the way we need to factor in risk as part of the procurement process. And I believe that over the next couple of years, we will see the best supply chain organizations out there starting to quantify it. We see people taking, organizations taking lots of risks without really thinking through them. An example right now is you shift production out of China to Malaysia, you double your transportation time. Well, having twice as long transportation time is a huge risk in this environment where you lose a lot of agility, and agility is key to market success. And what is the risk you're then running as part of that decision? So I believe that factoring risk in and starting to quantify it and looking at the market impact is going to make the best supply chain organizations much stronger.
Thank you.
I know we're out, but I might just add, I don't think it's a question of the model's capabilities. Our models already consider risk. It's more of a question of what importance do we as leaders in the supply chain and as business leaders put on that. You know, ultimately, are we weighing cost versus lead time versus risk versus redundancy? And so I think that's probably clear to most people, but it's not about the model's capability to quantify risk. It's about us leaders putting the right kind of emphasis on it, you know, for our future business profile.
And I think that's a good point, Scott, because as I said, we have millions of buyers out there who have not been taught that risk should be factored in. And while we may have in some departments, in some organizations, a group that looks at that, it's not pervasive throughout the organization to understand that.
Thank you again, and now to close on the Q&A, let's get a final recommendation from each one of you very quickly, like a lightning round. What is that final takeaway that you want to give the audience on how do we deal with disruptions in general, and how do we build that resilience plan moving forward? So let's start with Cindy.
Very good. Thank you. So one thing I just wanted to point out is that we were very lucky at ESRI, right? We had, even during a very disruptive time ourselves, we were able to pivot some resources. And I want to say this cross-industry collaboration that we saw between private and public sector, I want to encourage everyone to go and seek the data, seek the resources. USC has a tremendous amount of resources to help companies kind of help understand and what they could be doing to be more resilient. ESRI, we stood up a coronavirus disaster recovery hub or disaster response hub. It's still live. It has data and maps and intelligence and templates that companies can use. So be, able to look outside of your organization for help to bring in. And I think that's an important recommendation. Great. Peter?
Yeah, so from my perspective, I think it's extremely important in such an unforeseeable event. I think everybody needs to, or everybody knows you can't really do something good about it. You can only act as good as you already are, in a sense. So I think my recommendation, and if I had to give a recommendation, is really like enhance your capabilities before you need them. So be able to basically have the data, the information available to drive decisions and not start collecting data when you actually needed it yesterday. So I think this is really crucial, setting up a system within your company to be able to be capable of basically reacting to whatever comes. This is, I think, really crucial, and this is really an exercise that needs to be done before the event kicks in.
Great. Hannah?
I think the key word is collaboration, and collaboration has a technology aspect, it's got people aspect, it's got companies aspect. So pulling all of that together and having set up a collaborative culture in your supply chain up front is key, and using technology to really enhance that collaboration is another key factor.
Super. Tom?
Yeah, look, I'd like to echo what Hannah said about collaboration, right? Fostering collaboration, strengthening ties with suppliers, with customers, with what we call like-minded organizations is absolutely critical. And the other buzzword I'd like to leave with the audience is speed wins, right? You got to be quick. You have to be able to pivot. You have to be able to change, and especially in these uncertain times, take some risks, and make sure that the risks are as calibrated as possible. But you have to be able to get up and out in front, and number one, protect your business interests, and work with your suppliers and the supplier landscape overall to position yourself to come out of this pandemic as strong as possible.
Super. And Scott?
Yeah, I'll be quick. Speed, keep the business planning cycle and the operation planning cycle as fast as you possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not take our foot off the brake. There'll be a natural pushback of the organization to slow everything down and bring normal, keep it going fast.
Yeah.
That's what I'm telling myself and my team, even though sometimes they don't like it, but that's my recommendation.
I'll add one more very quickly. Business continuity plans should also include the suppliers and the external providers. Make sure to have that as part of your not only business continuity plans, but make it a process continuity plan, so that when these things happen, be that a pandemic like what we have today, or some other disruption, then you can pivot quickly, and as somebody said, be adaptable to the situation. Now we're finishing this panel. I want to firstly thank everyone for taking the time to join us, and not only from one location, but I think we have people from all around the world. So thanks for either staying late or waking up early for the ones in Asia. We hope that this panel has provided you a good take-home value. And I want to thank especially the panelists. You have done a great job in sharing your experience. So I'm very glad that we had this panel and this combination of experiences. With that, I would like to close the session and have a very good rest of the day wherever you are, and stay safe, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Josue.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
For attendees to really understand this group, this dynamic group, you got Josue's in Copenhagen where it's midnight. You got Tom in Singapore where it's 6 a.m. You got Hannah in that country called Silicon Valley where it's 3 p.m. I don't know where Peter is, but I don't think he's
located in Munich.
So where are you at?
In Munich, Germany.
Munich, okay.
Also midnight.
Yeah, so anyway, so tremendous panel. Thank you very much. Great moderation too, by the way. So, okay, before we head out to our last breakout sessions, Nick and I decided he should give his closing remarks now. And that way, when you go to the breakout sessions, you don't have to come back into this. So Nick, take it away.
Great, thank you very much. Again, once again, the panel, thank you. I know being in a global time zone, it's very difficult. Tom, great to see you. I use Tom Kruse as a Tom Cruise, and I entice, and every time I use his name as a speaker, I have at least 1,000 people, they sign up thinking Tom Cruise is going to be on. So we appreciate Tom, you've always been part of a very exciting panel.
Great. Thank you for having me, Nick.
Hey, absolutely. Wow. So, you know, COVID can disrupt the supply chain, but it certainly does not and cannot stop us from what we're doing in our lives, especially in supply chain. And this is truly a testament. We typically do this every year in August, face-to-face on campus. And we waited and waited, gathering the data sets to see if we can pull this off. And we realized 4 weeks before August 13th deadline that there's no way the County of Los Angeles, University of Southern California will allow 550 to 600 people come together like we have done 7 conferences together. So we pivoted in delivering a similar experience, but in the digital frontier. And honestly, were we nervous? Absolutely. Have we done this before? Absolutely not. But it is truly the team that I have, Marvi, Dennis, Ruth, Katie, Darcy, Maggie, Jeroni, Camille, Disha, Suchita, between the students and the staff, both at the center and the program. Nothing that we put our eyes on it and set the goalpost that we simply do not accomplish. So I want to thank them from the bottom of my heart, that without you guys believing things that we do, none of these things could ever be possible. My sponsors, my colleagues at USC, my panelists, my speakers, it is a commitment to wake up and stay up and many times even prepare for these conferences, but it is truly what brings the thought leadership in a global front, talking about the supply chain, which is so important. My working committee, they worked relentlessly for 9 months on preparing for this summit. So I know the names, Jean, Ochi, Emily, Ritu, Viola, Stephen, Diana. I'm sorry, this is like an acceptance speech from Oscar, but I want to make sure that I recognize their efforts in the times of crisis that you guys have been there. Jim Privyard, Kent Hines, Stephanie Hughes, Alvin Moreno, Anna Archibald, Ludovica, Carolina Brown, Sam Ganguly, Chris Allison, Niraj, Jason Walker, Sandesh. If I forgot anybody, I apologize, but I know there's a lot more, a few who showed up every week on Friday to plan for this. My staff from the Bank of America, you guys, and all the sponsors for Los Angeles, Long Beach, and many other, and ESRI, you guys been there, and my board, and my alumni, and last but not the least, my GMC, Global Supply Chain Management family at the Trojan, USC Global Supply Chain Center. I mean, you guys been really pivotal role in delivering this thought leadership in the global arena. So thank you. Again, this is not the end. I just want to make sure we're efficient. So next breakout session, certainly I want you to enjoy it. There will be, each sessions will be playing the video clips of a final comment, but I wanted to take this moment to deliver my gratitude to all of you to making this event very possible. And last but not the least, I have an incredible privilege to have Wink, who's been, this is his 5th conference that is part of it as an MC. And Wink, although I miss your energy in person, I think digitally you were as energized and as transparent as you always been. And I thank you for your friendship and your support in delivering an incredible summer.
All right, don't make me cry. Okay, thanks, Nick. And I want to thank everybody too as well. Thank you, Nick, for having me back. It actually is my 7th, but it seems like only 5. No, it's been great. And I want to also, you named your staff and all the stuff. I especially want to thank, out of all those folks, Dennis and Marby, who work closely with me to make my job easy. But your whole staff to bring together and organize over 100 speakers over 2 days. And we really didn't have a glitch, which that speaks volumes to the preparation work that everybody did. So congratulations. Thank you everybody for putting up with, one of my friends texted me yesterday who's attending and called me a dork. And so thanks for putting up with my dorkiness, everybody. My wife's like, what are you doing with all the wardrobe changes, the background changes and all this stuff? Yeah, just trying to make it fun for everybody. And I hope you've enjoyed that part of it.